Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome to Guns N' Roses True Story. Now this has been one of the most requested episodes I think I've gotten from a lot of you guys. And this is going to be a really interesting episode too. I know I use that word interesting always too much, but hey, what can you do? That's just who I am. So let's talk about Guns N' Roses and Nirvana and the feud that happened between them and their long history. So let's talk about, before the VMAs, we'll get to the VMAs, but let's talk about 1991, 1992. September of 91, both Nirvana and Guns N' Roses released their albums in the same month. Nirvana releases their critically acclaimed and smash hit Nevermind, and then Guns N' Roses released their double album Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Before the VMAs that happened in September of 92, there was a lot of events that actually happened before then that led to the tension between Guns N' Roses and Nirvana. And if you guys ever saw the video for Don't Cry, or even saw some paparazzi photos of Axl, you would know that Axl was initially a Nirvana fan. He even wore their hat with the band's logo for the video Don't Cry, and was even photographed in Ireland when Guns N' Roses played Slane Castle back in the spring of 1992. And one of the first mentions that Axl ever made of Nirvana was back in early 1992. Guns N' Roses were playing a show at Compton Terrace in Chandler, Arizona, and he gave his brief thoughts on why Nirvana was a successful band, which you can hear here.
You ever been let down? By, I don't know, family, friends? Something you wanted? Or maybe just life in general? You know the mood I'm talking about when something you like, maybe your friends are over and something you like comes on fucking TV. Something you like, but you don't fucking care because you're just not in the mood. It doesn't matter. You've been let down. I mean, it's kind of like this band Nirvana, why this Teenage Spirit, why this song's such a success. People relate to being let down. They'll say, oh, why are you always late? I don't know, maybe I'm always in a bad fucking mood about something.
And then in May of 1992, Guns N' Roses and Metallica announced that they would be doing a co-headlining stadium tour across North America. And it was originally envisioned by Axl that he wanted Nirvana to open for both bands. Now the problem was that while Kurt was a fan of Metallica, he was not a fan of Guns N' Roses, or more specifically Axl Rose. Now Dave Grohl, who is the drummer for Nirvana, did an interview with Esquire magazine where they asked, at last year's ESCY Awards, Slash told us his most memorable award show was the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards when Nirvana and Guns N' Roses squared off backstage. To which Dave Grohl responded, I remember when Nevermind first came out, Axl was a really big fan of us. Guns N' Roses was about to do a massive stadium tour with Metallica and they wanted us to open. So Axl had been calling Kurt nonstop. One day we're walking through an airport and Kurt says, F Axl Rose won't stop calling me. I think it represented something bigger. Nirvana didn't want to turn into Guns N' Roses, so Kurt started talking shit in interviews and then Axl started talking back. It went back and forth like a 10th grade bullshit. Then we got to the awards and our trailers were all in the same 100 yards and Courtney was there, which never makes things any easier. So it didn't take much to blow up into a full-fledged showdown. Kurt and Courtney were screaming at Axl. Axl screamed back. It was just soap opera BS. Chris, our bass player, almost got into a fist fight. I was just the drummer, so I shouted some loud, funny shit and hit the bar. Now there's a passage from the book Everybody Loves Our Town, an oral history of grunge. There's actually two passages I'm going to talk about, but the first one has to do with why Nirvana did not want to open for Guns N' Roses. So there's a story about Axl's sister Amy, who actually worked for Guns N' Roses back in the day, and she called up Bryn Breidenthal, who was in charge of PR or did PR for Geffen Records. Now both Nirvana and Guns N' Roses were signed to Geffen Records back in the day. And Axl's sister asked Bryn, why won't they accept any of the help we're offering, referring to why isn't Nirvana opening for Guns N' Roses? And Bryn responded by saying, you guys represent everything that they're against. You're big, successful, corporate $1 million rock band. That's the antithesis of Nirvana, but Axl didn't think of Guns in that way. Now, there was an interview that Kurt Cobain did around 1992, I think, or just before the MTV Video Music Awards, where he had this to say about Axl Rose. He said his role has been played for many years. Ever since the beginning of rock and roll, there's been an Axl Rose, and it's just boring. It's totally boring to me. Why it's such a fresh and new thing in his eyes is obviously because it's happening to him personally, and he's such an egotistical person that he thinks that the whole world owes him something. And it was also reported that Axl and Slash both went to a Nirvana show back in October of 1991, and Axl told Kurt, "You're everything I could have been." And around the same time, Kurt was giving more interviews and bad-mouthing Guns N' Roses more and more. So he did an interview back in 1991 where he said, "We're not your typical Guns N' Roses type of band that has absolutely nothing to say." The following year, he told a Singapore publication, "Rebellion is standing up to people like Guns N' Roses." Now, Kurt also talked a bit more about Guns N' Roses. He was asked in an interview whether there's anything about Guns N' Roses music he likes. He said, "I can't think of a damn thing. I can't even waste my time on that band because they're so obviously pathetic and untalented. I used to think that everything in the mainstream pop world was crap, but now that some underground bands have been signed with majors, I take Guns N' Roses as more of an offense. I have to look into it more. They're really talentless people and they write crap music, and they're the most popular rock band on the earth right now. I can't believe it." So comments like this infuriated Axl, and in the lead up to the actual MTV VMAs, Axl went on a rant at a show that Guns did in Orlando, Florida, about a week before the MTV VMAs in 1992, and here's the audio for you guys to listen to.
Now, we've had our share of problems with so-called alternative bands. What is this word? I mean, I didn't find myself using it. Alternative. Like someone who leads an alternative lifestyle. All I know is that when Guns N' Roses started, ain't no fucking radio stations wanted to play our shit either. Ain't no radio stations wanted to play Metallica. So I think we have the world's biggest alternative crowd here tonight. I think that the problem starts when you start thinking that you're different from everybody else on the fucking planet. You may be a little different in what you're doing or how you're going about doing it, but I got a good feeling that you're probably a human. Right? You're probably a human being. And so right now, alternative, only thing that means to me is someone like Kurt Cobain in Nirvana, who basically is a fucking junkie with a junkie wife. And if the baby's born deformed, I think they both ought to go to prison. That's my feeling. And he's too good and too cool to bring his rock and roll to you. Because the majority of you, he doesn't like or want to play to or even have you like his music. It seems to be a general feeling among a lot of alternative bands that they don't want the majority of people even liking them. They like it on the outside.
Fast forward to a week later, it's in Los Angeles at the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards. Both bands are performing, and Guns N' Roses is being presented with the Michael Jackson Video Vanguard Award. And backstage at the actual show, Axl Rose and his then-girlfriend Stephanie Seymour were strolling past Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, who were sitting with her newborn daughter, Frances Cobain. And basically, Courtney taunted Axl, asking him to be Frances's godfather, at which Axl exploded at Kurt and told Kurt to shut Courtney up. And then basically, Kurt Cobain turned to Courtney Love and basically told her to shut up. And the band's respective bassists, both Duff McKagan and Chris Novoselic, would also exchange tense words backstage. After Nirvana's performance of Lithium, drummer Dave Grohl further needled the Guns N' Roses singer, reportedly whining hi Axl," into the mic. And the same night, Guns N' Roses were going to be performing November Rain with Elton John, and Kurt Cobain thought he saw Axl Rose's piano and proceeded to spit on his piano. Now, Kurt Cobain was horrified to learn that he actually spit on Elton John's piano Now, following this event, both Axl Rose and Kurt Cobain went on to taunt each other at the band's respective concerts. So about half a week later, Guns N' Roses were playing a show in Toronto, Canada with Metallica, and Axl actually burned a Nirvana cap on stage, and the band played an instrumental jam of Smells Like Teen Spirit. Here's the video footage for you guys to check out.
I just wanted to get this on film tonight. This is a band of a bunch of fucking little pussies who think they're the only little fucking world addicted to rock and roll in the world. Let's see if we can fix this stuff. Come on, come on. It's not working, guys.
Nirvana.
It's not fire.
It's NWA.
Well, I need flames here. Help me out. You just sit there. My torch is a little picture.
No, it's Nirvana. It's Nirvana because...
There we go, we got fire, we have fire. There we go, yeah, we got fire. We got some fire. We got fire. No, just amuse us, folks, we're having a little fun, we're bored. We've been doing this show for about a year and a half, I gotta do something every now and then to get my rocks out. Sitting there in my booth and I just couldn't take it anymore. Just let it go, it's fine.
And then about a month later, in early October of '92, Guns were playing their final show as part of their tour with Metallica in Seattle. And of course, Seattle is the home of Nirvana and all these grunge bands. And Axl actually went off on Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, calling Courtney Love a whore. And then a day after the VMAs, Nirvana played a show where they actually talked a bit more about Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses. And then a fan actually came on stage and basically said, I like both Nirvana and Guns N' Roses. Why can't both of you guys coexist peacefully? And here's the audio for you guys to go check out.
You know, yesterday, my wife and I were sitting in a tent at the MTV Music Awards, and we're having lunch, and Axl Rose walked by us, and we yelled at Axl. We said, "Axl, will you be the godfather of our child?" And he said, he stopped, he turned around, he pointed his finger at my wife.
His bodyguard.
Yeah, well, he had like 20 bodyguards with him, and he's doing the Madonna documentary. He's got his little film camera with him.
And you had a 3-week-old baby in your arms.
And I had a little helpless child in my arms. And so he said to my wife, "You better shut up, bitch. Don't pitch me any shit tonight." Because tonight was obviously the highlight of his career. See, the last night was...
He said so.
And then he looked at me and he said, "You better keep your wife shut, or I'm gonna take you to the pavement." I was shaking and I went, "What? What? What are you gonna do? You're gonna beat me up?" And he said, "You better keep your wife's mouth shut. You embarrass everybody. You embarrass your wife, you embarrass your old man, you embarrass me." And then I was shaking and I said, I told my wife to shut up, bitch.
story. You heard it here first.
And so,
And then I ran into Duff McKagan. And that guy wanted to fight me. And he had 3 bodyguards who were like pushing me around. But see, that's the establishment rock and roll. See,
What?
they want you to buy their package rebellion of sitting on a Harley Davidson while you play piano with a 41-piece orchestra, just like Emerson, Lake and Palmer did in 1978. Say it, brother.
Hey man, I'm not sticking up for Axel or anything.
But
I'm not gonna stick up for Kurt, man.
well, you gotta take sides. Either you're yes on 9 or you're
wait.
no on 9, man. You gotta take sides.
No on 9, but I'm talking about Axel here. Just hang on a
You're
second.
talking about an asshole?
Man, I think you guys should let music be music, man. Let everybody express what they want, man.
Yeah.
Be it hard rock, be it Nirvana,
Right
be
on,
it
man.
anyone, man. Just let them rock the way they want to rock,
Yeah,
okay?
right on, man. But
Alright?
that's a corporate establishment.
but you can't let a rock star who obviously likes to beat women and likes to control women and who likes to tell women to shut up.
And who hates niggers and
Who
faggots?
obviously is a racist and a homophobe. He doesn't have the right to speak his mind. Well, he does have the right to speak his mind, but so do we, and he should
I'm
be
not
shut
sticking
up.
up for him, man.
And then a couple months after the actual altercation at the MTV Video Music Awards, Kurt Cobain did an interview with LGBT publication The Advocate, and he recounted the backstage encounter with Axl and again insulted Guns N' Roses as musicians and as people. He called Axl an effing sexist and a racist and a homophobe, and you can't be on his side and be on our side. I'm sorry that I have to divide it up like this, but it's something you can't ignore, and besides, they can't write good music. And then about a year would go by where things in the press would die down, and Nirvana were being interviewed for their next album In Utero, and the topic of Guns N' Roses came up once again on MTV, and they took a brief jab at their new video for the song Estranged.
Something poked out at me. It was a sea lion. Like looking at me. Wow. And I see all the breakers on the shore. Then here comes Slash, just like. And I crossed myself and thank the John Paul II.
Well, that leads right into my next question, because I want to find out what everybody thinks now that all 3 episodes of the Guns video's out.
I haven't seen the last one.
Now that
I get it!
sense, yeah.
Any thoughts? Like,
I think they still have something up their sleeve. Maybe there'll be a 4th. Yeah.
Whatever happened to John Paul I? I mean, how many days was he in the Vatican and he died? You know, that's what I get out of that.
so there's no definitive answer on that. I'm puzzled by that video, too.
And then about 4 months after that interview, Duff McKagan and Kurt Cobain in March of 1994 actually speak peacefully on a plane ride together. So days before Nirvana's frontman's suicide, Kurt Cobain found himself sitting next to Duff McKagan on an airplane back to Seattle. The musicians discussed rehab and addiction, and they discussed mutual friends they shared. We were talking about what it feels like to be going back home, the bassist later said. That's what he said he was doing, going home. McKagan wanted to offer Cobain a ride home after the plane had landed, but the Nirvana singer disappeared before he could even offer, and Cobain's biographer Charles R. Cross wrote in Heavier Than Heaven that despite the bad blood between the groups, Cobain was happy to see the bassist. Now, Duff has talked about this story in his book, as well as in this video on YouTube, which I've linked to down below. Following Kurt Cobain's death in 1994, one of the first calls that Dave Grohl got was actually from Guns N' Roses drummer Matt Sorum. So Dave Grohl appeared on Jon Stewart's show and said, after Kurt died, one of the first phone calls I got was from Matt Sorum. He left a message and said, "Man, I'm really sorry and I hope you're doing well." I thought that was really cool. And while Duff McKagan didn't initially call Dave Grohl or any of the members of Nirvana to offer his condolences, he did appear in Dave Grohl's documentary Sonic Highways, and in the Seattle episode he actually apologized to Dave Grohl for not calling him up and seeing how he was doing after Kurt's death. Now, following Guns N' Roses' massive 2.5-year World Use Your Illusion tour, Guns N' Roses tried to get into the studio and write new material. However, things didn't pan out that way, and during a Slash interview in 1995, he revealed basically that Axl wanted to do a solo project, and Axl's dream team, according to Slash, consisted of Nine Inch Nails frontman Trent Reznor, Jane's Addiction guitarist Dave Navarro, and Nirvana drummer Dave Grohl. Then according to Slash, Axl changed his mind and thought, why do a solo record if he could do it with Guns N' Roses? And Slash has said many times that Axl thinks of Guns N' Roses as a solo project back in the mid-90s. Now, Kurt Cobain passed away in April of 1994, and while Axl never publicly came out and made any statement about it or referred to his passing in an interview, there was a book that came out several years ago called Everybody Loves Our Town, An Oral History of Grunge. And there was actually a quote with Bryn Breidenthal, who was one of the publicists for Geffen Records. Now, Nirvana and Guns N' Roses were both signed to Geffen Records, and she started talking about the day she found out Kurt passed away and goes on to say, the first thing I did when I got back to my hotel room was call Axl because I was afraid of how the news might impact him. He was such an emotional roller coaster. I was afraid that Axl would hurt himself. He felt things really deeply and he felt a real connection there, even though there was no connection from the other side. I think he has a lot of empathy for Kurt. I was on the phone with Axl until 3 in the morning. Ultimately, it was okay, but I don't remember what was said because I'd had so many hours and hours of those kinds of conversation with him. One time I got off the phone with him and my teeth were chattering and I felt like the energy inside his head. We were talking on a level that wasn't even here and now, that was just pure energy out-of-body experience, except that my body acts like it's freezing or something. It was just so intense. And years would go by before we would really hear anything further about the Guns N' Roses and Nirvana rivalry. Now, Guns N' Roses were supposed to play Rock in Rio back in 2004 in Lisbon, Portugal, but due to some conflict that arose, Guns N' Roses had to pull out, and Foo Fighters basically took their spot. There's actually a video on YouTube of Dave Grohl thanking Axl Rose, sort of like a tongue-in-cheek, for not showing up. And he actually tries to play Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child of Mine on guitar, but really doesn't do a very good job because he claims he doesn't know their songs. And then a couple of years went by, and then we learned that Courtney Love and the members of Velvet Revolver, more specifically Slash, Matt Sorum, and Duff, actually were now friends with Courtney Love. And in fact, when Velvet Revolver would play songs live, they would actually do a cover of the Nirvana song Negative Creep. Now, a few years later, Duff McKagan actually became a contributing writer to the Seattle Weekly, just basically penning, opinion pieces. And in one of his columns, he actually apologized to Chris Novoselic of Nirvana for how he reacted at the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards. And a couple of years later, Duff would basically perform at the 20th anniversary of the Nevermind album, where he performed Lithium. And then several years after that, he actually performed with Chris Novoselic on stage, playing the song Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. And around 2010, Slash and Dave Grohl started to become friends because their kids went to the same school, and they actually performed in some charity benefits for the school. And then the same year, Slash, Lemmy, and Dave Grohl teamed up at the 2010 Revolver Golden God Awards and performed the Motorhead smash hit Ace of Spades. The same year, Dave Grohl actually played on Slash's solo album on a song called Watch This that also featured Duff McKagan. Originally, Slash wanted Dave Grohl to sing on the song, but Dave didn't feel comfortable, so instead he actually played drums. This song was later released on Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock as downloadable content. And in 2011, Dave Grohl came out and actually blasted Glee creator Ryan Murphy. The Foo Fighters frontman says that bands should not be pressured to feature their music on the show. So there was a lot of stories saying that certain bands are being pressured to basically give their music to the actual show. And he actually came out and defended both Kings of Leon and Guns N' Roses legend Slash after they both refused to lend their music to the program. Dave Grohl said, the guy who created Glee is so offended that we're not begging to be on his effing show. F that guy for thinking anybody and everybody should want to do Glee. And then in 2012, Slash was on Howard Stern promoting his new record at that time, which was Apocalyptic Love with Miles Kennedy, and the topic of Nirvana and the feud between Kurt and Axl and Courtney actually came up. So in the same interview, Slash dished on the beef between one of his former bandmates and another grunge icon. He said, Nirvana was great. I really, with all due respect to Kurt and Courtney and all that, there were some issues that happened having to do with Axl that I felt like they were totally right. And basically Slash was saying that he actually agreed with some of the criticisms that Kurt and Courtney actually had of Axl. And then in 2014, Dave Grohl had a huge birthday party with the Foo Fighters as well as a bunch of other guests at the Forum in LA, and one of the guests who actually came out and jammed with them was Slash. And then fast forward to 2016, Guns N' Roses are partially reunited, and Axl breaks his foot during the first show at the Troubadour, which basically puts their following shows in jeopardy. But Dave Grohl, who had actually broken his leg the previous year on their tour, was kind enough to actually lend his throne to Axl to use for Guns N' Roses' upcoming shows. And in fact, Dave Grohl and his drummer Taylor Hawkins of the Foo Fighters attended one of the shows in Vegas that Guns did. Following these shows, Axl would actually personally thank Dave Grohl on social media, basically saying thank you to Dave Grohl for the use of his rock throne, an amazing gesture, words aren't enough, and makes all the difference up there. And then the actual friendship wouldn't even stop there. Dave Grohl was even spotted at an AC/DC show that Axl fronted during their North America tour last year as well.